who's actually going to get real mileage out of a DIY engraving machine, and who would be better off putting their money toward a finished-off laser cutter. Is the 4540 Plus Engraver worth the price tag for someone who just wants to dabble with PCB etching or small wood signs, or does it end up being a hobbyist's headache? If you're on the fence, the question really comes down to how much time you're willing to invest in setting up, tweaking, and maintaining a CNC router that doesn't come with a laser module or a turnkey software suite. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the kind of person who will actually feel comfortable pulling this machine out of the box and turning it into a working shop tool. The 4540 Plus is marketed as a precision guide rail ball screw system, which means the motion axes are driven by ball screws rather than the more common belt drives you see on entry-level kits. In practice, that design choice translates to less backlash when you're cutting fine traces on a PCB or engraving tight lettering on a 3 mm thick piece of hardwood. If you've ever tried to get a clean 0.1 mm line with a belt-driven router and ended up with a wobble that ruined the whole board, you'll notice the difference right away. The machine also ships with a fairly generous engraving area, roughly 450 mm by 400 mm, so you can lay out a full-size PCB panel or a batch of small wooden tags without having to constantly rehome the workpiece. On the flip side, that same precision comes with a hidden cost: the need for a solid, level workbench and a bit of patience during the initial alignment. The ball screw mechanism is sensitive to any unevenness in the base, and the guide rails need to be square to the frame. If you're setting this up on a cheap folding table, you'll spend a few evenings squaring the rails, checking the squareness with a dial indicator, and tightening the bolts just right. In my experience, that kind of groundwork is not a problem for a seasoned maker, but it can be a turnoff for someone who expected a plug-and-play experience. The machine also runs on a standard GRBL controller, which is open source and highly customizable, but it means you'll be using third-party control software like Laser GRBL, Universal Code Sender, or BCNC. Those programs are powerful, but they aren't exactly beginner-friendly. You'll need to read a few tutorials or watch some YouTube walkthroughs to get comfortable sending the right code and setting the proper feed rates. If you're looking at the 4540 Plus primarily for PCB prototyping, the practical strengths line up nicely. The small stepper motor drivers give you fine control over spindle speed, and the rigid frame helps keep the cutter from drifting when you're working at the low speeds required for copper etching. Because the machine doesn't include a laser, you avoid the safety concerns that come with high-power diodes, which can be a relief if you don't have a dedicated enclosure. You can mount a 200W spindle or a small 300W router collet, and the software will let you pause mid-cut to change bits, something that's essential when you have to switch from a 0.2 mm drill bit for vias to a 1 mm end mill for board outlines. For hobbyists who want to produce a handful of prototype boards a week, the cost per board ends up lower than sending the design out to a fab house, especially when you factor in shipping time. But there are practical weaknesses you need to weigh. First, the lack of an integrated laser means you can't use the machine for engraving acrylic or glass without buying a separate laser module, and even then you'd have to deal with additional wiring and safety interlocks. Second, the spindle mounting plate isn't a quick-change system. You'll need a hex key to loosen the set screws each time you swap tools. That adds a few minutes to each job, which might be fine for a weekend project but could become annoying on a production run of 50 parts. Third, the power requirements are a bit higher than a typical desktop router. You'll need a stable 110V supply that can handle a 400W draw when the spindle is at full speed. If you live in a dorm or a small apartment with limited circuit capacity, you might find the machine tripping the breaker. Now, let's talk about who should skip this machine entirely. If you're a complete beginner who just wants to carve a nameplate once a month, you'll probably find the learning curve steep compared to a handheld rotary tool or a small benchtop laser engraver that comes pre-aligned and ready to go. The same applies to makers who already own a reliable belt-driven CNC router. The ball screw advantage will be marginal for most wood projects, and you'll be paying a premium for a feature you don't need. Finally, if you're looking for a portable solution to take to maker spaces or trade shows, The 4540 Plus is on the heavier side, the steel frame and guide rails add